I walked into my brother's engagement party, already feeling out of place. Crystal glasses clinked, mix, hummed perfume hung heavy in the air. Then I heard her. The bride leaned toward her friends and whispered just loud enough that the stinky country girl had arrived. Laughter followed. My chest tightened, but I didn't react. None of them knew I was standing in a hotel I owned, or that this night wasn't ending in toasts. Before I get into what happened next, tap like and tell me where you're listening from, and if you've ever been quietly underestimated, because what happened after that whisper changed everything forever. My name is Peyton Burns. I'm 32, and for most of my life, I've learned how to take up very little space. I speak softly. I listen more than I talk. I wear simple clothes that don't announce anything about me. Not because I lack confidence, but because I learned early that being underestimated can be safer than being noticed. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. My older brother Ethan was the star. Teachers loved him. Neighbors praised him. My mother Margaret built her pride around him without ever meaning to hurt me. It just happened. At the dinner table, his achievements filled the room. Mine were met with polite nods like background noise. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother. She had a way of holding my hand a second longer than necessary, like she was grounding me in the world. When I was a teenager, she told me I was a builder. Not of houses or things, but of stability. She promised me a necklace that had been passed down through the women in our family. She said it would be mine one day, because I would need the reminder more than anyone else. I left home at 18 with a single suitcase and no goodbye party. I worked whatever job I could find, starting at the very bottom in hotels. Long hours, sore feet, quiet nights, eating takeout alone. Over time, I moved up. I learned how everything worked. I saved. I invested carefully. I didn't tell my family. They never asked. For years, I sent money back anonymously. Payments, bills, repairs, medical costs. I didn't want credit. I just wanted them to be okay. So when the invitation to Ethan's engagement party arrived late, and almost as an afterthought, I still went. Part of me hoped things had changed, that maybe this time I would walk into a room and feel like I belonged. Standing in that ball, though, watching my mother beam beside Ethan and his fiancée, I realized I was still the afterthought. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I tried to disappear into the edges of the room. That's a skill you develop when you grow up knowing you're tolerated, not celebrated. I stood near a tall table, fingers wrapped around a cold glass, watching the party move around me like I wasn't part of it. My mother floated from group to group, smiling too wide, telling the same stories about Ethan. Every sentence started with his name. When she finally noticed me, her smile tightened. Her eyes dropped to my jeans and boots, then back to my face. She leaned in and asked quietly but pointedly if I'd considered wearing something more appropriate. She said Ethan's fiancé came from a refined family, stressing the word like it was a correction. Told her I came straight from work. She sighed the same tired sigh she'd used my whole life and turned away before I finished the sentence. That's when I saw it. The necklace. It rested against Lena's collarbone, catching the light every time she laughed. The delicate chain, the small familiar pendant, my grandmother's necklace. The one she'd promised to me while squeezing my hand in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fading hope. My stomach dropped so hard, I felt dizzy. I watched Lena move through the crowd, graceful and polished, accepting compliments like they were owed to her. The necklace looked wrong on her, not because she didn't look good, but because it didn't belong there. I was still staring when she found me. She approached with a smile that never reached her eyes, placing a hand lightly on my arm like we were close. She suggested we talk somewhere quieter. As soon as we were out of earshot, her expression changed. The sweetness vanished. She told me she knew all about me, about the money I sent home, about how I lived modestly. She asked why someone like me would keep helping people who never seemed to appreciate it. Then she answered her own question. She said it was probably because I was desperate to matter. Her words were soft, controlled, designed to bruise without leaving marks. She finished by telling me that once she married Ethan, It would be better if I kept my distance. Fewer complications that way. She patted my arm, turned, and walked back into the party, my grandmother's necklace glinting against her skin. I stood there perfectly still. I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. Something inside me simply went quiet. The part of me that kept hoping this family would one day choose me finally shut its door. And in that silence, I understood something clearly for the first time. This night wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. I needed air. Real air, not the kind filtered through chandeliers and forced smiles. I slipped out of the ballroom and into the hallway where the carpet muted my footsteps and the noise dropped to a low hum. This part of the hotel felt different. Familiar. Controlled. It always grounded me. That's when I heard voices. I slowed without meaning to. Ahead of me, near the corner by the service elevators, Howard Whitmore stood, with his phone pressed tight to his ear. His back was turned, his shoulders tense. He didn't notice me. I was too busy arguing in a low, urgent voice. I caught fragments. Words like after the wedding cash flow, and we just need them to believe it a little longer. He paused, listened, then said something that made my stomach clench. He mentioned my family, not by name but by implication. Their stability, their ability to help. He hung up and straightened his expression, snapping back into a polished smile before he walked away. I stood there longer than I should have, my pulse steady, my mind racing. That call wasn't panic. It was calculation. I went down to the parking garage and sat in my car with the engine off the concrete walls pressing in around me. I pulled up old records on my phone. Transfers, payments, bills I'd covered for years. Mortgage support, medical costs. Always anonymous, always quiet. My family thought they were doing fine on their own, and apparently someone else thought that meant opportunity. The pieces slid into place with uncomfortable ease. The Whitmores didn't care about Ethan or love or family. They cared about access, about what they believed my family represented. And if they were wrong, if the money wasn't really there, the fallout would crush everyone involved. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. I texted Daniel Cross and asked him to meet me near the service entrance when he arrived. I didn't explain everything. I didn't have to. I asked him to run background checks on the Whitmores. Quietly, thoroughly. He nodded once and left. Then I called my lawyer. Rachel answered immediately. I told her I needed options. Fast ones. I also called Hannah, someone who understood numbers the way most people understood emotions. I asked her to look for patterns. Anything that didn't add up. I went back upstairs, composed, calm, almost detached. Inside, the party continued. Music, laughter, glasses raised, but something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about being insulted anymore. It wasn't even about the necklace. It was about stopping something before it destroyed my family. And if that meant the truth had to come out in the most public way possible, then so be it. By the time I walked back into the ballroom, the night had reached that fragile point where everything looked perfect right before it broke. The music softened. The lights dimmed just enough to feel intimate. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass, signaling the start of speeches. Howard Whitmore was already making his way toward the small stage, champagne flute in hand, smiling like a man who believed the room belonged to him. Lena stood beside Ethan, her hand looped through his arm, my grandmother's necklace resting exactly where it shouldn't have been. My mother sat near the front, beaming, unaware that the ground beneath her chair was about to disappear. Daniel crossed my line of sight and gave the smallest nod. Hannah's text came in seconds later. You were right. It's worse than we thought. Rachel followed with a single sentence. Everything is verified. You're clear. I didn't feel triumph. I felt calm. Howard cleared his throat and began talking about family, about trust, about how honored they were to be joining ours. His voice carried confidence, practiced over years of telling people what they wanted to hear. He raised his glass toward Ethan and Lena and spoke about legacy, about building something lasting together. That was my cue. I sent one word to Daniel. Now. The screens behind the stage flickered. A few guests laughed, assuming it was a glitch. Then the slideshow of engagement photos vanished, replaced by a stark white page filled with official-looking text. The room went quiet in stages, like a wave rolling through a stadium. Howard's smile froze. The document on the screen showed a financial summary. Clean, simple. Names, highlighted numbers, rounded payments flowing into places they shouldn't have. Another page followed. A different state. The same pattern. Then a third and a fourth. The room filled with murmurs as people leaned forward, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Howard stammered into the microphone, calling it a mistake, a technical issue. He motioned frantically toward the booth. No one moved. The next image appeared, a photo of Lena younger, different hair, different name beneath it. She went still. The color drained from her face as quickly as if someone had pulled a plug. Elaine Whitmore reached for Howard's arm, whispering urgently, but there was nowhere left to hide. The documents kept changing. Reports, summaries, patterns anyone could follow if they were willing to look. Ethan turned to Lena, confusion written across his face. He searched hers for reassurance and found none. My mother looked between them, her smile gone, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. I stepped forward. Then the sound of my boots against marble cutting through the silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. I felt hundreds of eyes land on me, some recognizing me for the first time all night. Daniel's voice came through the speakers, steady and professional, introducing me not as a guest, but as the person responsible for the room they were standing in. I took the microphone gently from Howard's hand. He didn't resist. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice even, "but I think everyone deserves to know what they're celebrating." Lena finally found her voice. She accused me of lying, of being jealous, of trying to ruin her happiness because I couldn't stand being on the outside. Her words came fast, sharp, desperate. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply gestured to the screens. "These records were reviewed by professionals," I said. "They show a pattern of taking money under false pretenses, moving it through accounts, and leaving others to deal with the consequences. The names may have changed. The structure didn't." Howard tried to step away. Security blocked him calmly, firmly. Elaine began to cry, insisting there had been a misunderstanding, that everything could be explained. "That's exactly what this is for," I said quietly. The doors at the back of the ballroom opened. A woman in a dark suit walked in, badge visible. Her presence cutting through the room like a blade. She wasn't rushed. She didn't need to be. Two others followed her. She introduced herself and stated clearly and without drama that there were ongoing investigations connected to the information displayed. She asked Howard and Elaine to come with her. Howard's confidence collapsed in real time. His shoulders sagged. His voice cracked. He tried to say my name like it was a plea. Lena turned to Ethan, her grip tightening on his arm. She begged him to believe her, to remember what they had, to not let his sister do this. Her voice broke raw and frightened. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "I don't know who you are," he said quietly. "I don't think I ever did." Something in Lena snapped. She screamed, accusing me of destroying everything, of being exactly what she'd called me earlier. She lunged forward, but security intercepted her easily. As they guided her away, the necklace slipped from her neck and hit the floor with a sound far louder than it should have made. The room felt hollow after they were gone. I picked up the microphone one last time. "The food is paid for," I said. "The bar will stay open. You're welcome to stay or leave as you choose." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The DJ hesitated, then started the music again, softer than before. I walked over to my mother and showed her my phone. Transfers, payments, bills, years of support she'd assumed came from someone else. She stared at the screen, then at me, her expression folding inward. Ethan found me near the bar later. He didn't speak at first. When he finally did, it was to say he was sorry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. I held my grandmother's necklace in my palm, its weight familiar, grounding. The party didn't end with cheers or applause. It ended with truth. And that, I realized, was far more powerful. The days that followed felt quieter, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The investigations moved forward without drama. There were statements, meetings, careful language. Consequences unfolded the way they always do when truth is finally allowed to stand on its own. Ethan came by a few days later. No excuses, no speeches. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the certainty he'd worn his whole life. He told me he kept replaying the signs he'd ignored. I told him healing doesn't start with explanations. It starts with listening. He nodded like that was something new to him. My mother called after that. Her voice didn't carry authority this time. It carried weight. She said she hadn't known. I told her that wasn't the same as not being responsible. I showed her the records again. The payments, the bills, the years I'd stayed invisible, so no one would feel indebted to me. She cried quietly. Not to be forgiven, but because something had finally broken open. The necklace came back to me without ceremony. I didn't put it on right away. I held it for a long moment instead, feeling the cool metal settle into my palm like a promise kept, even if it arrived late. We didn't fix everything, not even close. But the pretending stopped, and that mattered more than apologies. Some endings aren't clean. They're honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the first real step toward peace. A few weeks later, I hosted a small breakfast at the hotel. A young woman from a rural town sat at the table, nervous, unsure if she belonged. I made sure she did. Watching her listen, learn, and slowly relax reminded me why I stayed quiet for so long and why I don't have to anymore. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel small by your own family, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Story 2. I attended my sister Lena's gender reveal party on a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind where everyone seemed a little too happy. She pressed an ultrasound photo into my hand, her smile trembling with excitement. "Isn't she beautiful?" she asked, eyes shining. I'm a radiologist. I've read thousands of scans without thinking. But the moment I looked at that image, my blood ran cold. The shape was wrong. The density was wrong. Everything was wrong. I forced my face to stay still, to not shatter her joy right there in front of everyone. But inside, something terrified had already taken root. Lena had always been the softer one between us. Growing up, she cried at Disney, movies, and taped glitter stars to her bedroom ceiling. I was the older sister with steady hands, the one who fixed things, bike chains, school projects, broken hearts. Even now, at 39, I was still the one people called when something went wrong. But that afternoon in her backyard, filled with pink and blue streamers, I couldn't fix a single thing without destroying her world. Neighbors clustered near the snack table, laughing over plastic cups of sparkling cider. Our parents hovered, close to Lena, touching her arm every few seconds, as if pregnancy had turned her into something sacred. Ethan grilled burgers at the edge of the yard, glancing over his shoulder to admire his wife every few minutes. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Maeve, take a photo of us. Mom called, waving her phone from across the lawn. I lifted my hand in a small wave but didn't move. My eyes were still on the ultrasound image tucked in my palm. I'd glanced at it once more on instinct, hoping my first impression had been wrong. It wasn't. I felt the familiar pressure settle behind my ribs, the same weight I'd carried delivering bad news to patients for nearly 2 decades. Lena bumped her shoulder against mine. "You're so quiet. Are you overwhelmed by all this cuteness?" She laughed, gesturing at the decorations. Cupcakes with little question marks, a giant balloon tied to a chair, tiny pink and blue socks, hung on twine with wooden clips. "Just taking it in," I said. My voice sounded steady, but my skin tingled with unease. I studied her face, glowing with the kind of hope that blinds people. She'd been talking to her baby girl for weeks. She'd painted the nursery. She'd picked out names. If I said anything now in front of 50 people, it would shatter her. I slipped the ultrasound into my pocket and forced myself to blend into the party. I refilled drinks. I smiled when people asked how work was. I listened to one of Lena's friends ramble about gut feelings and pregnancy instincts, while my own instincts screamed louder than the music vibrating through the speakers. But every time I looked at Lena, her hand resting protectively over the curve of her stomach, her head tilted as if listening for something, I felt the ground shift under me. Something was wrong. Horribly, impossibly wrong. I tried to steady my breathing, but years of medical training couldn't silence the instinct screaming inside me. The longer I watched Lena drift from guest to guest, laughing, touching her stomach, accepting every compliment about her glow, the more I felt like I was watching someone sleepwalk toward the edge of a cliff. The music thumped through the backyard. Someone passed out cupcakes. Our dad raised his phone to record everything. All I could see was that scan burned into my mind like an after image. Wrong shape, wrong density. A solid mass where fluid and tiny bones should have been. My fingertips were cold. I needed confirmation. I needed quiet. I needed Ethan. He was across the yard wiping his hands on a towel after turning off the grill. When our eyes met, he smiled at me, a goofy, hopeful grin that made my stomach twist. He thought they were about to find out the gender of their first child. He thought the future was about to drop into his hands like confetti. I moved toward him with purpose, weaving through clusters of guests until I reached the patio. "Ethan," I said quietly, "we need to talk now." His smile faltered. "What did she eat?" "Something she shouldn't." "Is everything okay not here?" I glanced toward the house laundry room now. Confusion flickered across his face, but something in my tone must have cut through the noise, because he followed without another question. We slipped, inside, shutting the door behind us. The thump of music became a distant pulse. "What's going on?" he asked. "Maeve, you're scaring me." I inhaled slowly, choosing my words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. Precise, controlled, mercilessly honest. "That ultrasound image," I said, "it isn't what you think." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's the baby. She's been—" "It's not a baby," I said, my voice dropping into a whisper. "Ethan, that wasn't a baby." For a second his face went blank, like a screen freezing before a crash. Then the color drained from it all at once. "No," he whispered. "No, that can't. She's been feeling kicks. I know what she thinks she felt. But trust me, I've read thousands of scans. This isn't a pregnancy. It's a mess, and it's serious." He pressed a hand to the washing machine to steady himself. "You're sure, Maeve? Please tell me you're wrong. I wish I were." Outside, the countdown began. 32. The party roaring toward a celebration built on a lie. Inside, Ethan looked at me with terror in his eyes. "What do we do?" The balloon popped. Cheers erupted. His world was already cracking. Mine had shattered hours before. Ethan's breathing turned shallow as the cheers outside swelled. Pink confetti drifted past the laundry room window like drifting petals. I could picture Lena crying happy tears, hugging our parents, believing everything in her life was unfolding exactly the way she dreamed. The thought made my throat tighten. "We can't tell her here," I said softly. "Not in front of everyone. Not like this." Ethan dragged both hands over his face. "She's been planning this for months. The nursery, the clothes, everything. How do I tell her any of this?" "You don't," I said. "Not yet. First we get her to the hospital tonight." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Maeve, she won't leave. Not after this. She's going to want to celebrate." "I know." My voice cracked, barely audible. "But whatever's inside her, it shouldn't wait." A knock startled us both. It was Mom. "Are you two hiding from the fun?" she teased through the door. "Lena's cutting the cake soon." Ethan looked at me, panic blooming again. I forced a steady breath, opened the door just enough to smile. "Just grabbing something," I said. "We'll be right out." Mom nodded, oblivious, and floated back toward the noise. Ethan whispered, "What do we tell her, her I drank too much?" I said, "Tell her you need to drive me somewhere. Anything that buys us time." He nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they're drowning and trying to pretend they aren't. We returned to the yard. Lena rushed toward us. Pink confetti tangled in her hair, a soft glow on her face that nearly broke me. "There you are," she said. "Ethan, you missed the photos. Our little girl, I couldn't breathe." Ethan forced a smile. "Sorry, babe. Maeve's not feeling well. I need to take her to get something." Lena's smile faltered now but the cake. "I'll be quick," he promised. "Save me a piece." She pouted but hugged me anyway, pressing her stomach lightly against mine. I felt my chest cave in. That roundness she'd been cradling for months. Not a baby, not a heartbeat, just a silent mass stealing space inside her. "Text me when you're better," she said gently. "I will," I whispered. 10 minutes later, we were pulling out of her driveway. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, knuckles bone white. I called Dr. Harper Lang before we even cleared the neighborhood. "Harper, it's me," I said. "I need you at the hospital. It's urgent. Full diagnostic workup, OB imaging, everything. My sister, something's wrong." Her tone shifted instantly. "Bring her straight in." At the ER entrance, Lena arrived confused but trusting because Ethan had followed my script. Inside the dim, ultrasound room, Harper's expression barely flickered before she excused herself to get a second opinion. I knew that look. I'd worn it many times. Then the screen told the truth. A solid ovarian mass, large, unmistakable. Lena stared at it. Where's the heartbeat?" Harper spoke gently. "There is no heartbeat." Ethan collapsed into a chair. Lena covered her mouth, shaking, but I felt her. I felt her move. I stepped closer, voice trembling. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry." Her world didn't crack. It crumbled. Lena didn't scream. She didn't collapse dramatically or lash out. She just folded like someone had pulled the bones out of her. Harper guided her to the bed, while Ethan held her hand, whispering apologies she couldn't hear. I stood near the door, unable to move. I'd spent years delivering terrible news, but nothing prepared me to watch my own sister's heartbreak in real time. Harper ordered immediate pre-op labs and paged Dr. Rowan, Blake, one of the best surgical oncologists in the city. When he arrived, he spoke gently, explaining that the mass needed to be removed as soon as possible. "It's large," he said, "but contained." "That's good. We act fast and we improve her chances." Lena stared blankly at him. "It wasn't a baby," she whispered. "I talked to her. I read to her. I bought clothes." Ethan's face twisted. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I should have." "No," she said sharply, shaking her head. "It's not your fault. Someone told me I was pregnant. Someone let me believe it." Her eyes drifted to me. I expected anger, but there was only confusion, grief, and a terrible kind of trust. "You knew at the party," she whispered. "A blade to the chest." "I suspected," I said carefully. "I wasn't certain until now. I didn't want to crush you without proof." Tears pulled again, but she nodded slowly. "Thank you for getting me here." Dr. Blake scheduled surgery for dawn. I stayed at the hospital, pacing the hallway while Ethan slept upright in a chair beside Lena. When they wheeled her into the O at sunrise, she reached for my hand one last time. "Don't let them get away with it," she whispered. "I won't. I promised." The next 3 hours crawled. When Dr. Blake finally stepped out, mask hanging around his neck, I braced myself. "She did well," he said. "The mass was large, but we removed it cleanly. She'll recover." Relief hit so hard my knees nearly buckled. Ethan cried openly. I didn't. Not yet. 2 days later, pathology confirmed the tumor was benign. Lena would heal physically, but emotionally, that was a different fight. She barely spoke the first week. Dr. Elise Warren, a reproductive trauma therapist, came to the house for sessions. Sometimes Lena listened. Sometimes she stared at the wall. She'd lost something she believed in with every cell of her body. A child, she'd named a future she'd rehearsed. One night while Ethan dozed on the couch, Lena whispered, "How many women did they lie to? How many thought they were carrying something real?" The question lodged in my chest like shrapnel. I couldn't fix the past, but I could stop the people responsible. I started with the boutique clinic Lena had visited, Nest and Bloom Imaging, a keepsake ultrasound studio tucked between a frozen yogurt shop and a nail salon. Their website bragged about high-defin baby previews and early gender accuracy. No mention of licensed sonographers. No disclaimers about not providing medical diagnosis, just packages, promotions, and glowing reviews. I dug deeper. Buried among the praise were a few uneasy comments. A mother who'd been told she was having twins only to learn one twin was an empty sac. A father who'd been promised a healthy baby, then discovered severe abnormalities at a real OB appointment. A woman who'd sworn she heard a heartbeat only to Miss Sarirai weeks later. I contacted these families one by one. Jenna Hale cried as she told me how Nest and Bloom insisted her baby was perfect. Her OB found congenital defects 2 days later. Lauren Perez said they'd promised her a boy. She delivered a girl with a chromosomal disorder they never mentioned. Michael Tan's wife lost her pregnancy after Nest and Bloom missed signs of complications. Amber Wu nearly died when her ectopic pregnancy went undetected. They told me everything looked fine. She said fine. I almost bled out in my apartment. Every story hit the same note. False reassurance from untrained operators. I compiled everything. Screenshots, testimonies, bills notes. Then I called Daniel Reeves at the State Medical Board. He listened carefully, then said, "We've been monitoring places like this. If you can gather more documented cases, we can take action." I didn't sleep for 2 days. I interviewed families, collected medical reports, requested permission to share their information. Slowly a pattern emerged. A map of negligence, lies, and lives shattered. Next, I contacted journalist Talia Grant, known for exposing health care fraud. She didn't hesitate. "Send me everything," she said. "This needs daylight." With evidence in hand, she drafted a segment for the evening news. But before it aired, Daniel arranged a coordinated visit to Nest and Bloom, an official shutdown. I went with them. Candace Doyle, the owner, stood behind the reception counter when we walked in. Pink walls, stuffed animals, fake medical posters. It was a theater of motherhood built on deception. "Can I help?" Her smile faltered as she saw the badges. Candace Doyle Daniel said firmly, "This facility is operating without the required licensing. You are hereby ordered to cease all services immediately." She stiffened. "This is just a keepsake. Business. People know it's for fun." "No," I cut in. "My sister believed you. She nearly died because of your fun. And she wasn't the only one." For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "Your sister must have misunderstood." She heard a heartbeat. I said coldly, "From a tumor." She went silent. Talia's crew arrived after the premises were secured. They filmed the interior, the evidence, the official documents. Talia interviewed me at this curb. "What do you want viewers to understand?" she asked. "That ultrasound isn't entertainment." I said it's medicine. And when untrained people pretend otherwise, people get hurt. The piece aired that night. Shockwaves rippled through the community. More families came forward. Lawsuits followed. Marissa Cole, a sharp, unyielding malpractice attorney, filed a consolidated case representing the victims. The trial took months. I sat behind Lena as she testified, voice trembling but steady. "I loved a baby who never existed," she said, "because someone handed me a picture and told me she was real." That lie changed everything. Candace stared at the table the entire time. At the verdict, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty on all counts. Candace was barred from operating any health-related business and ordered to pay restitution. She left the courtroom in handcuffs. Only then, only when justice had a face and a sentence, did I let myself breathe. Lena reached for my hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. For the first time in months, she smiled. Lena's recovery wasn't linear. Some mornings she woke up determined to reclaim her life, ready for therapy sessions with Dr. Elise Warren, ready to take a walk or cook something simple. Other days she barely spoke, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while the sunlight shifted across the floor. Trauma rearranges people quietly in ways you only notice when the world slows down. Ethan hovered gently, learning when to step in and when to give her space. He was different too. Softer, more protective, less certain of the world's goodness. Sometimes I caught him watching Lena with an expression that was equal parts love and fear, as if he worried she might dissolve if he blinked. I visited often, bringing groceries, helping with small tasks, handling insurance calls, anything that felt too heavy for them. Our parents came by with casseroles and awkward reassurances, still trying to understand how everything they celebrated at that party had been built on deception. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was quiet cups of tea, slow breaths, long silences that didn't demand answers. Months passed. One evening, Lena called and asked me to come over. Her voice held something I hadn't heard in a long time: steadiness. When I arrived, the house looked different, softer, warmer. Ethan opened the door with red eyes but a smile. "In the living room," he said. I stepped inside and froze. Lena was on the couch, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. The baby's dark eyes blinked up at the room like she was still deciding whether she belonged here. "This," Lena whispered, "is Sophie. We finalized the adoption this morning." Emotions surged through me so fast it left me breathless. Lena's smile trembled, not from pain this time, but from something gentler. "I didn't think I could love again," she said. "Not after everything. But the moment I held her, I knew she's ours. She was always supposed to be ours." I sat beside her, touching Sophie's small hand. It curled around my finger, impossibly light and real. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder. "You saved my life, Maeve. All of this, it's because you chose the truth." The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the tiny breaths of the baby sleeping against her chest. And in that stillness, for the first time since the party, I felt peace settle in my bones. Sitting there with Lena and Sophie, I realized the truth hadn't ruined us. It had saved us. Lies would have taken her life stolen. Her future shattered every moment that was meant to come. But choosing to face what was real, however brutal, made room for something honest and hopeful to grow. Families aren't defined by perfect moments. They're defined by the ones we survive together. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real stories of justice, healing, and family, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next